Okay, let's continue. So, where we left off is we were trying to reach a significant starting point for getting a real world problem solved. There's a lot that goes into how to go about solving real world problems. As kind of a quick review, we're working on this orienteering project to see what this looks like when it all comes together. So we have our course uh, class and we have our ID stick class. The ID stick has to carry around a lot of information, get updates, and get course information, validate that it's actually part of the course. And so there's a lot of little stuff that this has to do. Where we left was we were working on the update status function. So let's continue there. What this is actually detailing is it's actually um, it's actually detailing a couple of pieces that we're going to need, a couple pieces of information. So we're going to find the waypoint in the course list. Okay, how do we go about doing that? So we create a variable to store our information to, and this is waypoint list. So we create a list from the information in dot waypoints. So this is some of the information that's in course info and waypoints. So we create that list and we're going to create an index I'm going to use IDX for that. I don't often do this, but I will for this particular one because this will give a pretty reasonable range for what we're actually trying to do with creating an object and how this works. So we're going to find waypoint number. Yeah, this is the one we want, waypoint number. So the autofill is helping us again. Maybe that'll continue for a little bit. Find and then waypoint is on here. Find the waypoint on the waypoint list and n number of non-zeros to find. So we need 1 and we need direction, and we want to start at the beginning or the end, first or last. So we're going to select first for this. So this creates our index by finding a position in the waypoint list. Then what are we trying to do next? We need to figure out where is the status of the ID stick. So now we use our ifs to determine the status of the ID stick. So now that we've written status, we can select it. Or status is one of the properties up here. We're going to include this property So we're going to access it down here. So status. If the status is an error, we have a problem. So we're storing information to this as we're storing information to status as a string. And if it determines that all of this is badly broken, it'll be a little bit simpler to think through status. Spelling gets hard when you're only on the second coffee of the day. And it's already the afternoon. It's a real problem. It's indicative of poor life choices, pretty sure. Or if the ID status is comparable to done, meaning there's no more things that it needs to do. If either of those are the case, then don't fix it, it isn't broke. So what does that mean? That means store a value to OK. So we need an else if. We need an else if to cover the condition status no. Status is ready. Then we can do some other stuff. So else if ID status is ready. It is ready to update. So check the waypoint. There's a couple reasons why we need to do this, including we need to update the status to the variable OK. So in this, there's going to be another comparison using logic functions. And we're going to do a couple of steps to the comparison. So here we leave this false. Here we're going to compare if IDX is comparable to 1, then it's all good to go, meaning status, we're going to assign running to status. And okay to true because we need to be able to work through this and update. So it's all good to go. If index is not 1, then do the next things. We don't specify a condition for the else. So the all other conditions, if the index isn't 1, meaning it isn't ready for the next one, then it goes to false. If somebody's come back to the same, if they're finished and they've come back to the same waypoint to check in again, it'll also say okay as false, and it will not update again. So that's how you prevent them from just using the same waypoint 16 times to say that they completed the course when they didn't. It's like the kids who cheat in the corn maze by cutting through a wall. It's not how you're supposed to do it. All right, so there's a couple pieces of our puzzle resolved. We're going to need to do a couple more things down here. So we have an if, else if, so we have error, done, and ready. But we introduced this status running. So running, now we need to handle. We also need to handle remembering our equal signs when we're assigning a variable or assigning something to memory. So handle that. All right. So if, else if, we need an else in this update status function because we need to now do something about running. So this is essentially all other times during the running of the program, it's going to fall to the else case. So to okay, we're going to assign this is going to be there's a function called isEmpty. But there's another operator we need, which is the tilde, which tells us if there is something in the value index and it's not empty. Because sometimes in programming, you have to do a double negative to do a positive because otherwise you have to write much more code. Don't ask questions you don't want the answer to. So we set done if it's the end based on so remember I made reference to the fact that we would use some nested functions. Number of elements in WP list. So it's going to do something about the running. Then it's going to, if there's nothing else to do, then it's going to set status. This is where we actually assign done to status when it's complete. So this gives us the this gives us a couple of pieces that we need to make some of this operate. So we've got so this is, while it's running, it's saying okay as a value. It's going to update ID status when we're done in order to make that cooperate. We have our signal. So update status is a kind of a big function. This is why we didn't continue it before or in the last session. It's a lot of stuff going on. So signal, we've got complete now. We have the check the waypoint. So we have the information in this, and we have the register to give the person to the stick and the stick to the person effectively. And we have our arrangement for filling in the actual constructor for the ID stick itself. So we need to finish course now and make sure that this has all of the stuff that it needs to have. So we're going to have our properties of name level waypoints, and we're going to say we've got course defined. So course is going to have the arguments in and the error if there's nothing there. And we're going to add a couple more things into this later, kind of as we go along. But we're going to start building out our functions. So we've got the constructor, but we need to do a lot more stuff. So there's some other error handling and things that we can come back and add in that'll be nice to have, but to get just barely up and functional, we're going to need to get most of it put together. So we've been using OK in the ID stick as a status to basically, it's not the status of the stick, it's the status of the ability to update that data set on the stick with the new data, yes or no. So it's really kind of a function to give us a way to track permission as we're going through the steps for a real project. So the function OK uses check waypoint and waypoint IDX. Waypoint, this is going to use information from all three of these. And what kind, so we're not going to define the arguments or anything like that in here, but we're going to We're going to get the index of the last waypoint, is why we need that function. So we have an array that we're going to store that to. We'll think about the variables here in just a second. But we're going to look at the max, meaning the highest out of timestamps. This is going to get us the largest value out of timestamps. So the most recent, we use the max function to give us that information. We're going to come back and again, so we want to make sure that the current waypoint where we are is the next one that's going to be updated, because that will make sense. So to OK, we're going to assign this variable if comparable to the previous waypoint IDX. So this, we're also going to have to clarify what this is. This is what we're going to store our information to. So using the not operator, it's assigning to this variable whatever this max timestamp is, so that we can make sure if the next waypoint ID is 1 plus 1 greater than the last ID, because we're pulling some of that information from the timestamps data, or from that timestamps property, because it's not a property that we're defining for use by the course, but we're allowing it to be used from ID stick. This is making sure the next to update is going to be this waypoint. So we're going to be able to stay in sequence. So that covers this function. And that gives us an awful lot to work with. But there's one more, there's a couple more things that we need to be able to do. I think some of that we may wait to sort of fill out when we do some of the error handling of this. So I think we've got enough. I'm just going to walk back through each of the parts of this. So they don't have any, at least I don't think we have any real large gaping holes. So there's some error handling things that we're going to bring in, but I don't think we have major holes, because I think we've got variables and things defined. We're inheriting some of the stuff from the constructor there. That stuff will come into play for other functions that will include some error handling. So right now we have the course arranged so that when we call this course, it can take the person's name, level, and the waypoint information and share that back and forth with the ID stick. The ID stick can use course to call up what we're doing. We're using C for all of these. And I don't think I left any. Let's see. Signal, set that to now. More methods. Let me check and make sure I'm beginning and ending. Double checking your logic blocks and your functions for your ends and your arguments for ends. Making sure everything is balanced will help keep you out of some sort of dumb compiler errors, if nothing else. Yeah, function. Okay. So this, I believe, now that we've defined what we're doing there for the check waypoint. So the check waypoint is really important. Course, we use the check waypoint. Here we're doing some additional things and we're updating the status. So we need to be able to use a version of this check waypoint. It's a little confusing to have them named the same, so maybe I shouldn't have done that way, but this allows us to get some information. Okay. So, now we can, based on these, there's a couple pieces of the puzzle that we can actually start to do some testing with. I'm going to make sure to check for any last compiler errors or major compiler errors. Then we're actually going to come back over to Untitled 2 and start making use of our operators and conditioning here. So we're going to come back and take a look. We're just going to pull a couple more pieces of information together first so that you guys don't have to watch me grab all of that. All right, so let's do a couple of tests based on the fact that we've finished at least the skeleton for the course and the ID stick and see if we've actually done something to solve this real world problem. So we need to start with our, we need to start to be able to pull these. I'm going to save this as test 2. That way we can use a couple kind of common things. So we need an array we need an array of waypoints. So we'll say just some numbers. Okay, so we know that'll store an array accurately. We don't need to do anything else there. We want to then check we need to check the course function works. We need to check that ID stick works. We need to check that it stores information. There's a couple more steps that we do. We need to a participant. And we need to check that check waypoint we need to check and validate that the check waypoint, because we did all of that work, right? So these are the things that we need to go through and check. So what does that look like? Well, if a waypoint is out of this course, meaning maybe they go to waypoint 273, well, that's not part of this course. This is the array point. This is the array of waypoints. For a specific course. So we're going to work our way through and check some of these and talk about how to do that and what some of the MATLAB functions are and things that we can use to kind of help make all of this work. So we're going to start this in just a moment. All right, let's do this. So in order to check that the course function works, we need to call the course. So we're going to call and we need to give it, see, it recognizes that we need to give it a name. So we'll call it of course, the course name is greatest class ever. The level is the name for this specific set of waypoints. So we could call it double diamond, because maybe this is a super difficult course. And we're going to include the waypoint set W. We're going to leave this unsuppressed so that we can check and make sure that this runs. So we have problems at So waypoints, I'm going to shorten this. So this waypoints needs to be 3. So we're going to do these 3. Okay. Because we had done a size of 3 for this, waypoints has to be 3. Otherwise, it'll throw that specific error message. So that's some lightweight error handling that we did on purpose. I wanted you guys to see what that looks like and how that interacts with the command window. So, of course, course works, because why wouldn't it work? All right. Sometimes you're going to have to troubleshoot and do a little bit more legwork. This is very doable. So now we're going to test the next step, which is we want to take a look at, does ID stick work? So we're going to assign this value ID, and we're going to see something interesting in the workspace. So remember that ID stick is looking for a serial number. So obviously we use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, obviously, for the ID stick number. So we run this and we look to see, is this working? Your input must be 3 arguments or Deadpool comes to your house. So this triggered our error. Let's look at why, because it's trying to understand course info. So error defining course info, and it'll tell you in your program at line 10, it triggered this issue. But remember, we gave here, if the number of arguments in to course is not 3 name level waypoints, then if the arguments are fewer, so it's calling here to course, so it's calling to ID stick. So ID stick should be serial number, ID at I is the serial number. So this constructor is where it seems to be having an issue, because it's going to register and it's calling course info equals C. Course info from course. So the check waypoint should be able to pull the C. So now course info, why? I think course info needs to be because this is set as no, that one is 1 by 1 should be okay. Yeah, so that should be okay. The so course info and so course info, and as long as I think this might be down to an example where instead of course info, I'm going to change to course. So course and course. And let me save an update before trying a rerun. All right, so this could be a couple different problems. All right, instead of doing the last step of this troubleshooting live, I'm going to pause here for a second and we'll come back, resuming your normally scheduled programming. Like I said, this is a large project and the kind of thing that you would really do over the course of days unless you were doing coding as a profession. This is a pretty large project for you guys at this point in time. So we're not in a rush. We want to make sure things are working correctly. We want to test things. And it seems like our info here, seems like our constructor for course is having an issue. So we might have to introduce some additional error handling into course in order to get to the next steps. So that's what I'm going to do some kind of quick testing on, so that I don't, again, just bury you guys in information. All right, so a couple of the things that we're going to have to do is just make this course a little bit more robust, because there's a couple pieces that we were trying to kind of go quickly. I was trying to get you set up to be able to get to a minimally functional prototype. In this part, we're going to go to a little bit more error handling. So we're going to move this stuff out. So if the number of arguments is 3, start by setting the name. If it's not, then we're going to do a string conversion in this. So this goes under an if is string name, then do this, and we're going to move these guys out to stuff down here. So if the number of arguments is 3, we're still going to do a check check if name is string, then c.name is name, so store that to the property. Else you have to enter text or Deadpool comes to your house. Then you're going to check the level values. So if the number of arguments is 3, do this and so do this and check the level. So these need to come tabbed in by 1, make this all make sense. So check the level, and then the waypoints need to be numeric in order to make this work the way that it needs to. Waypoints need to be numeric. So what does that look like? Comparison. If else end. If is numeric. Waypoints. If is numeric waypoints. If it is, then c.waypoints is waypoints. Else let's see. Must input numeric values or Deadpool comes to your house. All right. Then so if our number of arguments in, this is going to handle more errors and scenarios if waypoints aren't correct and give us more detailed information that's going to help us better troubleshoot where course is having a conniption fit. Else if nr again greater than 0, yeah, then the error or Deadpool finds your cat. Something so that it's different enough that you can understand where it is and track it a little bit more easily. And then, so that function ends here. All right. So that function ends. Okay. So that takes care of some additional error handling. Okay. So I think that part is working correctly. Now we will use that function, but we're going to do that we're going to use that later in this example. So we're going to save this update. We're going to check in on ID stick one more time and make sure this has info that it needs. Our properties. And we're going to come back and mess around with the encapsulation of the data here later, because there's so many different things that can happen in this process. We just want to be careful about how all of this works and cooperates. So we've got our properties set up. Those are the correct size and data type. That starts throwing some light error handling in by having those set up. So first function, ID stick with serial number. I don't think our program was actually getting hung up here. I think the constructor is okay. But one thing that could happen with the serial number, yeah, so we've got for 1, 2, oh, this is incorrect. That's why. 4, 1, 2, that part's incorrect. I didn't spot that. So that was for sure giving us a problem. So the serial number was not going to register correctly based on that. So there is an argument in there. We need to go for the range. Yeah. So we need to build it. So serial number at I. So that should work better now, because it's I from 1 to the size of the serial number, storing those values to ID. So there's a couple more pieces to the puzzle there. I'm going to check register. From here, there's another process that, in order for this to be a real world solution to a real world problem, we'd need to have a custom function to display things back to the user so that they can read them. It's not critical for the data storage, so I'm trying to get this functional without that block of code, but we'll see if that cooperates. So yeah, serial number, so that's okay. Course, okay, so those are working. All right. So there's a couple pieces to this. For register, because this is where I think we had a failure. So we are using waypoints. We've defined signal. We've got name coming in, but it seemed to throw a fit right here at course. Maybe we have fixed the problem that we had with course. Otherwise, we're going to have to add in this display, which brings the data back to a top level for users to view. That part, let's see, we're storing name to participant, we're storing C to course info, we're storing time to timestamps, we're storing ready to status, and setting the signal to true. So register makes the ID stick beep for status updates. So I think this part's all correct. Size of C dot waypoints. Yeah, so that C dot waypoints should be okay. So we have check waypoints, we have ID and waypoint num. Waypoint num. C is ID.course. That part should be fine. ID OK and N. Update status. Check waypoint, CID and N. So that one. This is making reference to this is one of the ones that I need to verify here. So using the this is the one that's defined under course.m because it has the 3 arguments. So course.m, it's got the 3 arguments. This is where over here we're using C, ID, and N for the waypoint ID to update this. So check waypoint. We haven't thrown an error on this, but that's what this is referring to, not the check waypoints. That's you can't run a function inside of itself. So I want to clarify that. This is they shouldn't have the same name and spelling because that's not great. not great. That could be done a little bit more clearly. So waypoint num we're using. ID, OK, and N. So we're storing that. If N works, OK, we store waypoint, CID, and N. All right, signal ID and OK. ID and OK. This is updating status. So we're going to check. We're going to check our function signal, make sure that works. Because ID stick should update. This one, update status, needs to have an output store. And that's one thing that I didn't do here. So signal doesn't need to, but update status does need to store. And update status will not store correctly. This is probably where our 3-argument mismatch actually was coming from. So we're using IDX for the index in here and all of those things inside of this. So this is probably actually the function where we were having a malfunction. That could actually have been our bug right there. Is the part of what makes all the stopping and starting fun is occasionally I'll forget that I need to include something like that. Because the update needs to push out the 3-argument set. All right, so let's save that. That might make this whole block run a little bit better. So let's go back to our test. I'm going to drop this by a few just so that it's a little smaller. We're going to rerun and see. Of course, at least one end is missing. Methods. I feel like I've suggested to you guys. Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. And the function C equals course. That also would do it. That was not the error we had earlier. That was a self-inflicted wound, so I deserve that one. Yeah, okay. So there's that. Take that. All right. At least the program loses better than some people on TikTok. I'll leave that where it lies. Okay. So ID stick. It works. Excellent. All right. Here this whole time, you guys were all taking side bets. Well, you were wrong. It works fine. Okay. Check that it stores information. Okay, so it did a thing and it stored ID. So we've got our course, we've got our thing. All right, so this we can suppress. This we can suppress. We know those work. Now, does it store information? And how do we evaluate that? So once we've done that, we want to use, there's a couple MATLAB functions. This is a function called properties. This gives us information on what it can find for that object, basically. So properties, ID. Now that we stored something to ID, does ID have properties? Similarly, methods allows us to look and see, kind of do some spying on our own code that we wrote to say, okay, do we do this? All right. Here we get, when we run this, the properties for ID stick, serial number, timestamp, status, participant, course, and methods, check waypoint, ID stick, register, signal, update status. So these are the functions that are within. So it is properly recognizing that these exist and work. We're also going to check that register is storing the ID to a user. So we say ID to that, we're going to store using register. What goes into register? The ID. So we need ID. We need name. So the person's name. So we'll pick some Gen Z name. Aren't like 3/4 of the kids born after the 2000s named Aiden or something. And then C, because we need to use these. So let's see if register, does register work with a name and C and ID, unrecognized variable for register. What is going on with register? Because that's in our stick. Register, D, name, and C. C is there. C we need to define because we don't have it in our workspace. So that's not the program's fault. We need to tell it what C is. So we need to give it a variable C. This is where we need to assign up here. We could just write C above there. I'm just, for the purposes of doing diagnostics and checking, we're going to store this information to C. And now when we look at it, there we go. So the status is ready. It's a 1x1 course and it's registered to the participant Aiden, serial number 123456. So it's working. Of course it's working. No surprises. We spent a lot of time working really hard on that ID stick, so I would expect nothing less. All right, given that information, check the waypoint, validate. So we're gonna do ID equal check waypoint. It's our function. What does it need? It needs arguments. So it needs ID, because we've got to use that ID. This is the object that we're storing all this information for, and the waypoint number. So first we're going to use 42 because that's in our set. So we run it and okay, good. It updates status to running. Excellent. It's exactly what we should see. 42, 123. So ID in 123, run that, ready, ID and 696, run. Okay, so it updates. And now we're going to try another one, 325. Okay, so it should do some checking. It is sending out the buzz output. We'll deal with some of that later. There's more stuff that we could suppress inside the check waypoint function, because there's a lot of stuff going on in here. So signal specifically, yeah. So this, I think we can suppress the output, and we run this and we get a little cleaner, but not enough that it matters. So, all right, that's okay. So check waypoint, it is at least functioning for the baseline level. So our functions work, we're doing the things we need to, and we will come back to do some updates in the next one.